Aurora 4X. To those that know it, this is one of the most complex and deep 4X strategy games ever created. As those that do not, it is intimidating and inaccessible. Today we'll be looking at it from both a positive and negative lens, using my own experience in the past 3 years of creating videos and playing it, to inform you as best as possible on if the game is worth your valuable time. Though do bear with the video, as I expect it to be quite lengthy due to the game's aforementioned complexity. Aurora is called many things: the sci-fi dual fortress, spreadsheet simulator, story generator, and that thing you put on while at work that you somehow can still enjoy but won't get you fired. The game is so many things to a lot of people, but Aurora at its core is a bit of it all. The game was developed by a single man from the UK who decided that he wanted a way to tell the sci-fi stories he cared about. So, to start with, let's look at what the game is and what it is not. When you first start Aurora, the game presents you with a tactical map, an overview of our solar system, and enough buttons to make anyone think twice before continuing. This is a common theme in Aurora. The layers of complexity are presented to you with little remorse in terms of lack of tutorial or handholding. Instead, you either learn from an outside source or use trial and error to get better at the game. The most generalized premise for it is that you are an empire who has gained access to space travel and now is expanding out into the stars. You will take the star you have picked and grow it towards what you want to do in terms of exploiting, expanding, exterminating, and exploring. And the key word there is picked. You decide how you want to begin, how you want to shape your starting conditions. It is truly a sandbox, and you can tell this as you open the settings window to create a new game. Presented with various options to start in whichever way you want, many new players may get confused or simply move past and hit the new game button. Some of these options are purely roleplay, such as starting data or adding political nepotism, while others can seriously affect your experience of Aurora, such as adding more AI threats to your game. And this is where the strength of its premise lies, the ability to create the story you want to create. And it makes sense, as that's what the game was designed to do: simulate a sci-fi story in whichever way you want. But with that strength comes weaknesses. Its visuals are best described as clean or utilitarian, not exactly expecting to win any awards. The best visuals you will see in the entire game are going to be race images of yourself or other aliens, or a nice flag you picked out when you first started the game for your race. In terms of music, there is none, and the user interface is controversial to say the least. Most people would agree it's not the best. Even after years of improvements, there are many issues, the most glaring of which is a lack of user feedback, with no tutorials in the actual game itself, and a complete lack of real tooltips besides the small outdated ones you get at the bottom of certain options. You're really left to fend for yourself, and if I was a new player, I would feel intimidated and ignorant, because as much as you can play, there's always the feeling you've done something wrong or forgotten something, and the game does not tell you off for it. Furthermore, the user interface is downright sadistic in its repetitive straight injury inducement that could rival StarCraft 2 for the amount of gamers it sends to the hand doctor, with many windows and actions requiring multiple drags over and over in repetitive manners, or buttons that need to be repeated. And while this has improved since the last version of the game, it is still a sore point. Speaking of gamer-related health issues, the game is at least not in white anymore in the majority of its windows, so blindness is unlikely comparatively to other similarly complex games. Looking at you, Rule the Waves. However, the colours selected are also, to a lot of people, painful, with yellow on the blue background not being the best choice ever made. When you consider that the game is done primarily if fully in text and reading is vital, the colours chosen can significantly impact your enjoyment of the game and endurance in terms of playing it for long stretches of time. These colours can be corrected using supported mods. However, since this review is about the game as it stands and not additional add-ons, I will not be counting that, as it requires the player to do additional work than traditionally expected. With all that being said, however, I do recognise that I've been quite negative here, and that is largely due to the manner in which the game prioritises its factors. Clearly, the user interface is not a priority over gameplay or details, and many who may be interested in Aurora are likely going to be much more tolerant of such flaws. Said flaws are unlikely to be wholly fixed for a multitude of reasons, however, and it is important to understand that they exist and the clashes you as a player may come up against with dealing with them. For some, that may be a deal breaker, and can be an outright turn off. once you glance upon the game and look at it. For others, an annoyance that they tolerate. It's certainly an area that needs improvements and will likely frustrate for years to come. Let's move on to the gameplay and world building, and oh boy is there a lot to discuss in this chapter. This is the true meat and potatoes of Aurora, with almost all focus being placed on the gameplay and providing a conducive environment to build the world around you that you want to see. To start, the game is built in details, from the first time you hit new game to the commands you use to move ships around. This is where it's at its best. To give an example, fleets of ships can be given a variety of standing and conditional orders, essentially orders which they will either always perform or will perform upon conditions, and in this small part of the gameplay, there are a total of 60 such orders, from telling a fleet to survey a body for resources, to activating shields when detecting an active hostile enemy in the same system. As stated, this is the game at its best, but by many also at its worst. With so many details presented to the player, it can create confusion, indecision, or just outright not wanting to engage with certain systems. As I myself know people who simply do not take part in an entire section of the game, ground forces, because of its complexity. This detail-orientated and extensive collection of options is not unique to any one part of the game, and truly speaking, it is what Aurora is built on. So let's take a look at that, as well as how you can build your own world in the environment the game provides from the start. To start with, Aurora has no true default start. Like other games which have a linear story with chapters or set start dates, with maybe only a few options to choose from, Aurora, however, throws the kitchen sink at you in terms of how and where you will start your game. You can adjust the data which you will start, the amount of population, industry, ships, technology, and many other things, even including what race you are, with a completely customizable stats that all have game impacts, such as how much oxygen your species needs to be able to survive on new worlds. This is extensive, and as stated, can overwhelm or create indecision, but it's also frankly awesome. It allows you to dream up a scenario and usually be able to create one that matches your goals. This assumes, of course, you know how to do so and which buttons and switches to push to get your desired outcome. Once you have come up with that dream start or just hit play button skipping past the virtual buffet of options, you will then be presented with a tactical map and even more options along the top and left hand side of your screen. This map and window is where you'll spend the majority of your time. With other windows being brought up over this map, the map itself is utilitarian, but shows the solar system or whichever system you started in great detail. While not all bodies are here, it is a majority of significant bodies that actually matter. And from this point, your experience is going to vary significantly, depending on the aforementioned styling options, but I am going to try and give a quick rundown on the kind of gameplay cycle you're going to deal with. You will likely create a story or goal for your campaign that you yourself would like to see. Then you will want to accomplish this goal. Since Aurora has no way to complete the game, it is up to you to complete your set out goals. With those in mind, you then need to find yourself through the various options utilizing the industrial window to build new installations which need resources that are harvested by building more mines. These new installations then provide you other capabilities like researching new technologies to build ships or increase output of key industries or to increase the number of officers available to the player. This gets you into a truly 4x cycle of wanting to expand, and to do so you need to exploit your resources, and then to build more you need to seize more territories, and in the process you may need to exterminate those in your way and explore further and further out. To explain that cycle, let's go through it. But before we can do that, I need to explain the turn-based nature of the game. This is what I would call a variable turn-based game, with the ability to change how long a turn, or in game terminology, an increment is, from 5 seconds being the minimum time, to 30 seconds or 30 days being the maximum time. With that in mind, let's look at the cycle. A player will set up his or her empire's production, research, officers, assignments, and much more through the various windows provided. They will then perform increments until interrupted in what is known as an event. Once such an event happens, the game pauses and the player looks at what has happened. The player can also pause the game themselves to look back to the aforementioned windows, so what you end up with is a cycle of incrementing, pausing, looking back through settings, setting things back up, and then incrementing. This repeats with the primary interruption being combat, but even there, this same cycle repeats but on a smaller scale. These cycles are a core aspect of the gameplay, and you're what you will be spending the majority of your time doing. Such things are not unique to Aurora, with many 4X games of the genre doing the same, but where Aurora takes it to another level is the detail in each action. You can spend hours on a single turn or going over every single detail and making intricate plans. And I think from how much I've brought it up, you can truly claim the symbol of Aurora's gameplay is the details. It's truly hard to articulate just how much you are able to do, and also how unique you can be from others and how they play the game themselves. Outside of this cycle, the other thing that breaks it up is ship design and ground design. While we discussed how the player is constantly adjusting things, doing logistics, building vessels or infrastructure, the design phase of it all is one of the best parts of the game. The ship design is truly expansive, with the ability to design vessels however you like with a few actual requirements. You want to design a large battleship that can also carry fighter squadrons? Go ahead. You want to design a super fast interceptor with a laser gun to blow missiles out of the sky? You can do that too. This mechanic is truly what sets Aurora apart from other space 4X games out there. There are no set ship classes, with only loose rules regarding what is a fighter and what is a fast attack craft, which provides some bonuses but not strictly needed to be adhered to in the doctrinal sense. This means a one-man's destroyer sitting at 10,000 tons could be another man's small dinghy. You can design all major components from the ground up, from the engines to the fire control systems to the armor layers, shields or no shields, sensor systems, and much, much more. And all these systems and components have to be designed, researched, and then added to design. It's an incredibly expansive system, as previously stated, that while complex, allows unparalleled freedom to create. I myself have spent hours in this window making new ships and designs that I want to create and spend time with. And this doesn't change much in regards to ground combat. With an expansive set of parameters and research, you can put together your ground forces however you like. There are more limitations than ship design in that it means that you can do a great deal, but there is some limitations on full scope as there is not in ship design. But you still can do a great deal, and again, a lot of freedom is available in this regard. These two things are some of the biggest strengths of the gameplay, and something I wish other games had. Next, let's take a look at world building. How do you create the world around you, and how does the game incentivize you to do so? To give you an example, in the game, almost all components can be named whatever you want. And there is no lore explanation for how anything works, no codex or wiki you might see in larger, more well-known games, and one may first think this is an oversight or unfinished, but I disagree. This is an intended feature to abstract parts of the game, such as ground forces, where a single infantry element could mean to one person a squad of individuals fighting on the front lines, and to another person just one human soldier fighting as they would. Whatever your internal logic is, the game will allow you to fit it in and will work within your story and universe. Intentional abstraction is vital to helping the player build a world around them and in that game and immerse themselves into that game. While other games seek to provide the player with an already built world in which they can immerse themselves into, Aurora is more like a tool to help create such a world that you can then immerse yourself into. For many, that can be a boon, but for others who just want to play a game and be presented with something to sink their teeth into and read about, are not going to find it easy, as it's on the player to create this lore and story. That's not to say there isn't organic story creations and events that happen thanks to the AI and situations that occur in the game. These can both help tell a story if you plan to, and also present a basis and context for your actions if you look at the game from a purely mechanical perspective. Overall, I would say the world building of the game is strong, but only so much as the player is willing to work with it to create such a world. Now moving on, I think it's important to discuss some of the oddities and issues with performance. And while the game has come a long way since the last version, that being Visual Basic 6 Aurora, C# still has difficulties. That being, in the time it takes to increment due to the amount going on, it takes a lot of time if you decide to start with many aliens or just play for a longer period of time. This is also coupled with the fact that other alien races will fight each other and cause combat slowdown, as it's known. This slowdown can create a long time to get through and bring a campaign to its knees. These slowdowns are of course negatives, but with enough patience you can get through it. However, it's an area that can definitely turn people off the game. And I'd also like to discuss some oddities about how the game has been designed. Because the game is free and a hobby project of one man, it is both amazing in how detailed and impressive it is, but also flawed in many areas thanks to this core principle. An example of this path is development and balance. Areas of the game not played in or actively thought about by the developer tend to not see any development or balancing / quality of life improvements. This leads to players who do play in these areas to have weird or tedious experiences that an otherwise general approach would have dealt with. So keep that in mind when you play the game and find yourself asking, why is it this way? Even if it doesn't make any rational sense, it's probably due to the aforementioned reasons. So let's take a little step back and ask ourselves, who is this game for? And what are some of the positives you may be interested in partaking in, or negatives that could dissuade you from doing so? In terms of positives, the game provides you with an expansive and free world in which to craft your 4x star empire. From the massive potential in the galaxy, the abstraction of things to allow story crafting, and the extensively detailed systems such as ship design. If you can put the time in, it's truly unparalleled to any other game in terms of its complexity and thus scale. To achieve all of this, it's incredibly impressive, and its complexity as well as scale provides a challenge for the player to deal with in whichever way they see fit. On the other side of things, the user interface, quality of life features, and balancing combined with certain limitations and the obvious lack of graphical and user feedback leads to negative aspects of this review. If you can move past those negatives and look into the positives, it's truly a gem, but it's not for everyone, and the developer never intended it to be so. In fact, many say the game is only for the developer himself and nothing else, and this can explain a lot of the oddities previously discussed. So, should you get Aurora Veteran? In my opinion, I think everyone should try it out and decide at what point is either too much effort or complexity for them. And if they can handle those things, then they may be able to find some really amazing enjoyment in this game. It certainly takes a unique kind of person to do so. So, it being free does give you the ability to truly determine after a short while if it's for you or not, and that's great. With all that being said, and this lengthy review now being put to rest, do tell me your thoughts on things you thought I should have mentioned, or positives and negatives you yourself feel around the game. Would you recommend it to your friends? And if you enjoyed the content, I'd appreciate any support you can give, as these videos are a new thing for the channel and take a lot more effort than my regular content. I'll see you guys in the next review.